Hey guys, Kevin here. So this week has been a very important week in our fight for our Second Amendment rights. Because this week, we have seen the left open what I believe is the last chapter in their playbook to take our guns away. And that is them openly calling for a repeal of the Second Amendment. Now, we have seen people on the left call for the repeal of the Second Amendment before. We've heard people in academia saying that the Constitution is an antiquated document, and it was written for farmers with muskets. But this week was the first time that we really saw the mainstream media and the power players in the Democratic Party echoing this sentiment. So it's no surprise to me that the Democrats are moving on to this next phase of their operation to take away our Second Amendment rights. I know they just had this March for Our Lives, and the media is touting it as a success, but I don't think the Democratic establishment sees it that way, and for a couple of reasons. One, a survey done at the March for Our Lives showed that only 9% of people in attendance were actual kids. The majority of them were, no surprise here, baby boomers. Also, out of that 9%, many of those kids were bussed in by left-wing activist groups. Not really a big organic presence like they had hoped for. The second reason is that these kids are just not likable. And when you see kids like David Hogg on stage giving a communist revolutionary salute, that terrifies a lot of Americans. When you see kids like David Hogg calling their parents stupid effers, that terrifies a lot of Americans. When you see kids like Emma Gonzalez apologize for the people who were bullying the school shooter and saying that you didn't know this kid, we bullied him for a good reason, that terrifies a lot of Americans. Also, many of these kids have been caught lying, and most importantly, they cannot defend the policies that they are pushing. They can't defend the agenda that they're trying to push. So now we are seeing the Democrats start to come out from behind the curtain and call for a complete repeal of the Second Amendment. They're playing their hand. They're bringing out the big guns. People like John Paul Stevens, a former Supreme Court justice, and he wrote an article, an op-ed for the New York Times that is in syndication today, and it is calling for a repeal of the Second Amendment. And the media is out there echoing that sentiment. And I want to read to you guys from this article that he wrote. So the name of this article is "Give Up Your Guns, You Stupid Peasants." And it's got a nice little picture there of a musket next to a semi-automatic weapon. Actually, it's called Repeal the Second Amendment. I made that first part up. But it goes, "Rarely in my lifetime have I seen the type of civic engagement school children and their supporters around the country showed this Saturday." It says, "The demonstrators demand our respect." No, they don't. "They reveal the broad support for legislation to minimize the risk of mass killings of school children and others in our country. That support is a clear sign to lawmakers to enact legislation prohibiting civilian ownership of semi-automatic weapons." That is basically all weapons in our society, because sure, people own bolt actions and crack barrel shotguns, but the majority of weapons out there are semi-automatic. It would also bring us back to technology that's before World War I. So you would be heavily outgunned by criminals if you tried to defend yourself with a crack barrel shotgun or a bolt action rifle. It says, "Raise the minimum buying age from 18 to 21 years old. Which is unfair. I was an Army veteran. I went to war when I was 18 years old. And believe me, I was on a base with 3,000 young kids who had fully automatic weapons, grenade launchers, and all that stuff. Nobody killed each other. We killed other people for sure, but we didn't kill each other, which is the important part. So it's totally stupid. If we're going to raise the minimum age to buy a weapon, we also need to raise the minimum age to join the military, which John Paul Stevens would oppose because he is a globalist and he is part of this political establishment who have no problem sending young boys to war, but they just don't want young boys to fight a revolution against their corrupt establishment. So they want to disarm the populace, but they have no problem arming your sons and daughters, basically. And also, let's face it, we need to raise the voting age too to 21 because these kids are just too dumb to vote. So if you did both of those things, maybe I'd be okay with raising the minimum purchase age. Let's see. But the demonstrators should seek more effective and more lasting reform they should demand a repeal of the Second Amendment. So right there, he calls for a repeal of the Second Amendment, and he says that these demonstrators should be the ones to do it. And they are. I mean, look, they've beat around the bush for a while. They've pretended that they are just seeking moderate approaches to gun safety, or, you know, in their words, common sense gun control. But they never can say what that common sense gun control is. Or if they do say something, it's like universal background checks. Well, we already have universal background checks, and that wouldn't have stopped any of these mass shootings. So they're full of crap. So it goes on. Concerned that a national standing army might pose a threat to the security of separate states led to the adoption of the amendment, which provides a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. Today, that concern is a relic of the 18th century, the same century John Paul Stevens was born in. And it blows my mind that people like him, who have witnessed several world wars, a civil war. I'm joking, he's not that old, but still, this idea that we're living in the current year, 2018, and that nothing is going to be a threat to the United States is ridiculous. All over the world, we are seeing turmoil. We have witnessed 2 world wars in the past 100 years. So, of course, it can happen again. It can happen again very easily. And the only thing that kept Japan from invading the United States was the fact that there was a gun under every blade of grass. But put that aside for a second. We are not worried about people invading because we own these firearms. But what is very worrisome to a lot of people in America is the fact that there are people here who want to push agendas that have led to mass genocide time and time again. And they always start with disarming the people. People who are on stage giving communist revolutionary salutes. That is the very reason that we have a Second Amendment. That is why we have militias. Okay? There's a reason that most of our militias in this country strongly oppose communism, strongly support our Constitution. It is because they know and understand that that document is the only thing keeping us from being overrun by despots. Now, for over 200 years after the adoption of the Second Amendment, it was uniformly understood as not placing any limit on any federal or state authority to enact gun control legislation. In 1939, the Supreme Court unanimously held that the Congress could prohibit the possession of a sawed-off shotgun because that weapon had no reasonable relation to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia. That is not why we prohibit sawed-off shotguns. Sawed-off shotguns are legal if you buy them from the factory sawed off. You can buy a short barrel rifle. You can buy a pistol grip shotgun that has a short barrel. It is only if you modify the weapon yourself because of safety concerns. During the years when Warner Burger was our Chief Justice from 1969 to 1986, no judge, federal or state, as far as I am aware, expressed any doubt as to the limited coverage of the amendment. When organizations like the National Rifle Association disagreed with that position and began their campaign claiming that federal regulation of firearms curtailed the Second Amendment rights, Chief Justice Burger publicly characterized the NRA as perpetuating one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime. So, look, the NRA is just a group of people who get together and give money to lobby Congress to protect their Second Amendment rights or push for legislation that they want to see enacted. Okay? It is the American people who own guns having a voice in Congress, and they use that voice regularly. Now, sure, there are gun manufacturers who do provide money to the NRA, but when you look at membership in the NRA, especially after you see membership go up when kids are out there protesting against the Second Amendment, it shows that the NRA is much more organic than the anti-gun movements. In 2008, the Supreme Court overturned Chief Justice Burger's and other long-settled understanding of the Second Amendment's limited reach by ruling in District of Columbia versus Heller that there was an individual right to bear arms. I was among the 4 dissenters. That decision, which I remain convinced was wrong and certainly was debatable, has provided the NRA with a propaganda weapon of immense popularity and power. Overturning that decision via constitutional amendment to get rid of the Second Amendment would be simple and would do more to weaken the NRA's ability to stymie legislative debate and block constructive gun control legislation than any other available option. Well, sure, because if you repealed the Second Amendment, then there would be no debate. Congress would just go in and pass every single law they could to disarm the American people. Because we've seen time and time again that the members of Congress have no interest in protecting the American people. They have no interest in doing anything to empower the populace. In fact, they want to do the opposite. They want to disarm the populace because we are the only people standing in their way of becoming completely corrupt. So he finishes. That simple but dramatic action would move Saturday's marchers closer to their objective than any other possible reform. It would eliminate the only legal rule that protects sellers of firearms in the United States, unlike every other market in the world. It would make our school children safer than they have been since 2008 and honor the memories of many, indeed far too many, victims of recent gun violence. Well, no, it wouldn't. It would not make anyone safer. This guy's a Supreme Court justice, and apparently he doesn't understand what prohibition does. Prohibition would criminalize millions of people overnight. It would cause black markets to explode in communities all over America where otherwise they wouldn't exist. All you have to do is look at the cities that have the strictest gun laws and see that they are some of the most dangerous cities in America, that they have some of the highest gun crime, and that's not by accident. Here's the thing that really bothers me. In this whole article, he didn't express one good point on why we should ban firearms, why we should repeal the Second Amendment. All he did was call it an antiquated document, called the Second Amendment a relic, and basically voiced his distaste for the NRA and for people who are pro-gun. And so you have this guy who's being called a genius by the left, who's being celebrated by the left as this great scholar when it comes to legal precedents, and he has nothing to offer but the same thing we heard from these kids, which is that our Second Amendment and our Constitution are relics, and that they know best when it comes to gun policy, even though they cannot defend the policies that they're trying to enact. So the Democrats are going to continue to celebrate this justice and people like him who step up and call for a repeal of the Second Amendment, but they're not going to tell people what that would require, what the requirements are to repeal the Second Amendment, which is 2/3 of Congress and a majority of the states. And for them to all vote to repeal the Second Amendment is never going to happen. Okay? So they may try to make an end run around that somehow. I don't really know how they would do that. There are some ways that they could try to change the Second Amendment or reinterpret the meaning of the Second Amendment, but we'll be there to stand in their way. You know, when people on the right say out our cold dead hands, we mean that. All right? Especially knowing that there are people like Justice John Paul Stevens who realistically dislike Americans. They dislike what America stands for. They dislike our rights, our constitutional rights. They have no respect for that Constitution. And people like us know that that Constitution is what makes America great to begin with. It is what provides us with the paperwork, the platform, the outline for our republic. And the second we start destroying the things that built this republic into the greatest country on earth, then we no longer will be the greatest country on earth. So guys, I did this video off the cuff. I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't want to try to repeat the same arguments I've made in the past 20 gun videos. So I didn't really focus on debunking anything, but there wasn't a lot there to debunk. He's just arguing his opinion here, and he didn't really present any facts to back up why this would be a good idea or anything else like that. So, you know, I'm tired of making gun videos, really. I don't want to repeat the same things over and over again. But the fact is that until the left either have a change of heart or push us into a civil war, this issue is not going to change. They're not going to stop pushing us. And I really think they want the latter instead of the former. And a civil war is something that I think they have not taken off the table. You know, they want some sort of conflict. It's in their blood. You know, like I said, communists, they practice conflict theory. They always need conflict. And that's what they have here. They have more conflict, more ways to divide America. And the fact is that when you're dividing America and you have Americans who know that you're trying to divide us, what makes you think that we are going to sit by and let you take away our guns? Anyway, I'm out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys will follow me on both channels. Please subscribe to The Patriot Punk because it is the channel where I want to do my more edgy stuff. I'll link some things in the description below. Go check out Mr. Dapperton's Liberty Network where some of my videos are also featured. And yeah, that's it. I'm out.